So thank you everyone for joining this morning, or this afternoon, I should say. Let's just switch here to the presenter. Great. So thank you for taking time out during your Thanksgiving week to spend a few minutes with Nuance today to talk about Dragan law enforcement. Before I begin, I wanted to just make a couple of very quick remarks. First of all, as Elena said, please, throughout the presentation, please do enter any questions you have in the Q&A box within the WebEx. We'll be collecting those questions, and toward the end of the Q&A, end of the session, I should say, taking your Q&A questions and answering them. Secondly, before we jump in, I suspect many folks on the phone today may be familiar with Dragan in our consumer product. Dragan, naturally speaking, is a product that a lot of people have heard of, and it really is a personal productivity product primarily used with Microsoft Office and email. And I mention that because as we looked at the law enforcement market, we realized in creating Dragan law enforcement that the needs and the documentation requirements of law enforcement are very, very different. And so we've spent a lot of time creating a customized product for law enforcement, specifically for the needs of the market. So we're going to focus today on one particular aspect of the documentation process in law enforcement, and that is incident reporting. We'll speak to some of the challenges in the incident reporting process that we discovered as we were talking to customers and talking to police chiefs, lieutenants, etc. Speak to why Dragan is a better approach to use in the incident reporting process, and specifically why it is that Dragan is a purpose-built product customized for the law enforcement community. We'll jump into a live demonstration so you can see the product. We have a sample RMS system that we use for webinars like this, so you'll get a sense of how it is that you can create a narrative within Dragan law enforcement. And then, as I said, after the live demonstration, we'll jump right into a Q&A session. So with that said, again, looking at the incident reporting process, is we went out and created this product and spoke to law enforcement personnel. Where is it, we asked ourselves, do we add value into the process for law enforcement? So specifically, when we took a look at what patrol officers in particular go through as they create incident reports, there were really three challenges that came forward as we looked at it. One, the process can be time-consuming. Secondly, it can be an inefficient process. And thirdly, and very importantly, the process can actually create risk to officer safety and lack of omnipresence in the community. This is the slide that we kind of refer to as a by-the-numbers slide. So as we went out and spoke to police chiefs and police departments throughout the country, whether it's the 2 hours that an officer may spend from initial writing up of a report through submitting it, or sergeants that we spoke to that were spending 45% of their workday doing nothing but administrative tasks, or even a mid-sized police department that was spending $96,000 a year on outsourced transcription services. These costs can add up, and they really result in a number of challenges that officers face in the field. Primarily, officers may not be heads up and situationally aware. If they are typing an incident report and they're bent over their MDT and manually typing that report into the RMS, that can cause issues relative to awareness and being heads up and, again, situationally aware. If officers are back at the station and they have handwritten notes, or they're moving from incident to incident and they get backed up in creating incident reports, that has issues relative to specificity and the amount of detail and immediacy that gets captured in the reports that do get submitted. And again, time back at the station can result in lack of omnipresence within the community. From a regulatory compliance standpoint, there's going to be increased and has been increased focus on more and better reporting. Mandates like the NIBRS mandate, which will be fully implemented in 2021, is but one example of the need for more, better, higher quality reporting. And of course, all of these increases in demands for this reporting don't come with requisite it increases in resources to handle it. So police departments are looking for a better way to handle their documentation demands. And again, this results in increased costs and reliance on either internal administrative or outsourced services and transcription services. So why use Dragan law enforcement? I wanted to take a minute to briefly reflect on this quote, which came from the 2015 Police Chief magazine from Chief Terrence Cunningham, former IACP president. And in it, he really speaks to one of the primary drivers for why it was we created Dragan law enforcement. The idea that today's patrol vehicles are packed with more and more technology, while potentially a very helpful and very useful tool for police officers, there are times when it can create a distraction. And so the idea of being able to use speech recognition to help manage that technology within the vehicle is very important, and that's precisely what Dragan does, and we'll show you that momentarily. But as we go through this presentation, please do keep this quote in mind, because we'll be returning to this idea of officer safety time and again. So why is Dragan law enforcement a better approach to incident reporting? It really comes down to, again, these three themes. The first being improving report management and compliance. Secondly, increasing officer safety. And third, freeing up time to allow officers to spend more time in the field. What is very clear is that officers using Dragan law enforcement can speak from a productivity standpoint. They can speak 3 times faster than they can type, and that helps tremendously. Dragan captures, even in very noisy environments, using our PowerMic tool, which I'll be showing you shortly, as well as with very high accuracy and accounting for a wide range of accents as well. What happens is that officers using Dragan have greater accuracy, more complete reports with greater specificity and detail. And this all helps officers that are spending time moving from incident to incident complete those reports and increase the time that they spend meeting the deadlines that they have. From an officer safety standpoint, again, the idea here is that an officer does not need to be typing in manually, hunting and pecking on a keyboard into the MDT. In addition to the idea of creating a narrative for an incident report, which I'll show you shortly, we make the RMS easier to use because you can now issue commands as well to click on links, to move back and forth between fields, all by voice. So that also, from the standpoint of time spent in the vehicle and awareness and being heads up without being bent over, contributes to officer safety. And then finally, from an omnipresence standpoint, again, the idea being here that an officer has more time to be in the community, protecting and serving, less time on reports, which is what officers get into policing to begin with. So I mentioned that Dragan is a purpose-built product for law enforcement. I'm not going to read this slide to you here, but as we went out and saw the unique needs that law enforcement had from a documentation process, we built a lot into Dragan. So there's an awful lot of customized vocabulary that you get immediately just from opening Dragan up, and I'll show that to you momentarily. We've included car and truck makes and models. All are included. So when you speak, if there's an officer that has a stop and he mentions a 1995 Honda Civic, Dragan recognizes that and will instantly transcribe that for you. We've included U.S., Canadian, and Mexican states and provinces. One of the things we discovered is an officer may pull over someone from either a province in Canada or a state in Mexico. They have an out-of-state license. Dragan recognizes all of those states and provinces, either in Canada or in Mexico. And finally, even things, unfortunately, we have a profanity, a list of words of profanity that unfortunately many of you have had to listen to as part of taking an incident report, and whether it's pulling someone over for a stop or reporting to a domestic disturbance, profanity is a fact of life, and we've built that vocabulary into Dragan. Again, from a productivity standpoint, officers are now much more able to capture the immediacy with their voice of a report, so they're moving through reports faster, and they're able to speed and make the RMS much easier to use, and do things like I'll show you shortly to look up plates. One of the things that Dragan includes is the ability to use the NATO phonetic alphabet, so you can enter into a plate mode and say something like Whiskey Tango Charlie, and Dragan recognizes that as WTC and will automatically transcribe that for you. From an officer safety and satisfaction standpoint, I think the big piece here is officers did not get into the field to be spending up to half of their day typing reports, but many of them, as all of you know on the phone, many of you, including yourself perhaps, spend an inordinate amount of time doing just that. And so Dragan allows the officer to increase their satisfaction in the job because they're spending less time on reports, yet doing a more complete job and a more detailed job in creating those reports because they're still a very important part of the job. And then finally, from a return on investment standpoint, it's not just the dollars and cents that are saved by not going out and having to rely on outsourced transcription services, whether that's a voice file that gets sent out to be transcribed or whether it's handwritten notes. It's not just the dollars and cents, it's also this what I refer to as a reputational risk perspective. I don't need to tell anyone on the phone that every citizen today with a cell phone and with access to social media is by definition a publisher. And sometimes those videos that may be captured of an incident which could become a high profile incident don't capture the reality or the entirety of the process. So in addition to the use of body cameras, the ability to have very detailed reporting that captures the immediacy of what happened in that incident really backs up and fosters trust with the courts and with ultimately the public of incidents. So it's all of those features that add up to return on investment with Dragan. Finally, we have as an integral part of our solution what we refer to as our PowerMic. This is a ruggedized microphone and integrated mouse in one product. And what this is, you'll see a representation of it here on your right is an icon, which is a rough representation. It allows for a number of things. First of all, it's a very ergonomic device that officers can use to navigate with their Windows applications on their MDT within the RMS itself. It is very rugged, it stands up to the punishment of daily use, and is an integral part of Dragan. One of the things that officers tell us that they really appreciate is the microphone can be turned on and off with a button and a familiar press-to-talk dictation capability. So they press the button, they speak, they release the button, and Dragan is no longer listening. The PowerMic as well can also help officers because, and the department at large, because the buttons can be pre-programmed at a department-wide level. So pressing the button can either do things like advance through a particular RMS system, or even do things like execute what we call an auto text, which is essentially a word that you might say speeding citation, and that will populate an entire block of text that contains form fields that you can then fill in with specific information like the vehicle and rate of speed, etc. So the PowerMic is a very integral piece of Dragan law enforcement, and I thought it would be definitely worth pointing that out, and we definitely would look forward to showing anyone on the phone how that works within law enforcement. And let me back up. And before we get to the live demonstration of the product, we've focused today on the patrol officer and the incident reporting process. but Dragan scales truly across the department. And if you think of the efficiency of one officer scaled across an entire department, there are other, whether it be a detective, who we have many departments that their detectives are capturing witness statements, and they're capturing suspect interviews, their notes from those suspect interviews, and just transcribing all of those notes as soon as they have those conversations. Even things like digital recorders and MP3 files. If an officer or detective is using a digital recorder, Dragan can take the digital file, the sound file, and actually transcribe all of that for later use. Records management personnel benefit greatly because now they're getting reports that have greater detail, greater specificity, as well as the introduction now of standardized commands. I mentioned something like having a speed citation, and all of a sudden you have, throughout all of the reporting that comes into records management, more standardized reports in the same types of formats with greater specificity and detail. Police chiefs and their command staff also benefit greatly, not just from the savings from not having to use outsourced or internal transcription services, but also by complying more with IACP appeals, as I had shown you earlier from Terrence Cunningham, for introducing speech recognition into the process in patrol vehicles that are packed with this technology. And then finally, IT and admin staff, when using our Nuance Management Center, all of the licenses for Dragan can be centrally administered. And so what that means is that if an officer leaves the force or a new one comes onto the force, those licenses can be assigned quickly and easily. In addition, you can assign things like customized words. So if there's a unique street name or address for that particular city or town, that can be entered once. And once that word, that piece of vocabulary, if you will, is entered once, it can be pushed out to the entire force so that it's easily and centrally managed. The other thing that we find in talking to police chiefs and their staff is by being able to monitor usage of Dragan across the entire force, you can spot training needs. You can spot who your power users are, and the ability to say, we have Charlie over here who's using Dragan all the time and is turning his reports in quicker, they're more complete, etc. Maybe in our next staff meeting, we'll have Charlie come out and show the rest of the team how it is that he's using Dragan. And in that way, you can also help drive ROI justification as well, and again, scale the benefits of using Dragan speech recognition throughout the entire department. So with that, I'm going to get into a live demonstration. If you give me just a moment here to share my screen. Great. So hopefully everyone can see a Google page at the moment. And before we get started, what I wanted to do was just point out what the Dragan interface looks like. And at the very top here, you'll see our Dragan bar. And right now, if you look at the bar, I'm moving my cursor over it, you'll see there's a microphone in the center. That microphone is currently red. That means that Dragan is not listening to my commands right now. I can turn Dragan on and off either by using my PowerMic or by using custom commands on my keyboard. I can use the plus sign, the minus sign to turn it on and off, but typically we use the PowerMic for that. If you move to the left and the right, you'll see the various settings and tools for Dragan, including the ability to create under the command center. You can add a new auto text. You can create custom commands as well. In addition to number of advanced features here I won't get into, but you can also use Dragan to play back text and read text back to you so that when an officer creates a report, they can actually read it back to themselves to make sure that it's accurate. So again, at the moment, Dragan now has a red microphone, meaning it's not listening. What I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce an RMS system that we've created just for this purpose, and I'm going to turn Dragan on, and I'll bring you through a sample incident reporting process. Open RMS. So I just turned the microphone off, and you'll see here this is a very basic RMS system that we created. What I'm going to do is I am going to use my voice to navigate within this RMS and show you, I'll actually read a narrative for a sample incident report. Click Incidents. Click Link. Choose 6. Now, before I proceed, again, you'll see that when I said click link, there were a number of links that came up that were numbered. I chose 6 for this particular report. So I'm going to go now into the report notes, and I'm going to read an actual narrative. Click Report Notes. On November 21st, 2017, at approximately 10 p.m., I was dispatched to 3191 Oak Street for a suspected burglary, period. I arrived at the address and met with the responding officer who told me that the homeowner, Mr. Fred Brown, returned home from a night out with friends to find his back door smashed in, period. Mr. Brown did not enter the premises, but called the police from his car phone, period. Officer Smith searched the home for intruders, period. No intruders were found. However, there was evidence of someone having been in the house, period. I walked through the house with Mr. Brown to identify any missing items, period. Mr. Brown will prepare a completed list with serial numbers and bring it to the station tomorrow afternoon, period. New paragraph. The evidence collection team was called in to take fingerprints and photographs, period. The following evidence was collected, photographs of the damaged back door frame, period. Photographs of footprints in soft earth near back door, period. Fingerprints taken off of back door frame, period. Fingerprints taken off of kitchen countertops, desktop and study, and chest of drawers in master bedroom, period. So again, I just shut Dragan off, and there is the narrative that was captured, all very quickly and very accurately on screen. I'm going to submit our report now. Click Submit. And Dragan just submitted. This gives you a brief overview, obviously, of what was just submitted. Dragan also can be used, as I mentioned, to look up plate numbers. So I'll give you a very brief demonstration of how that works. Click Vehicle. Enter plate. Click plate. Enter plate. Whiskey Tango Foxtrot 1234. End plate. Submit. Undo. Enter plate. Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, 1, 2, 3, 4. Click Submit. And again, here we returned a sample record, obviously, of a potential suspect and some basic information on that suspect themselves. So hopefully this gives a very brief idea of how Dragan can be used in the RMS. We work very closely with the major RMS providers. And what we should point out, and Dragan operates essentially anywhere where there is a cursor in place of your keyboard. So it works in any system, Windows-based system. If you can position a cursor in the Windows-based system, you can actually dictate. And so you really need to think of Dragan as an extension, a replacement, I should say, for the keyboard itself. So let me pause just for a moment. I want to show as well some of the integration and some formatting within Microsoft Office. And I'm going to open up a Word document, and I'm going to actually read a sentence, actually a couple of paragraphs, the Miranda rights, and show you how it is the Dragan can be used for some formatting as well. So let me reactivate Dragan by clicking on the microphone. Open Microsoft Word. New document. The Miranda rights. Select rights. Here you'll see the Dragan you probably just saw momentarily. I just shut the microphone off. Dragan presented a list of options. So what I'll do is I'll select rights again, and you can then see the options. What I want to do is make the R in rights a capital. Select rights. Choose 7. New paragraph. You have the right to remain silent, period. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law, period. You have the right to speak to an attorney, comma, and to have an attorney present during any questioning, period. If you cannot afford a lawyer, comma, one will be provided for you at government expense, period. Select your. Choose 2. Have. So here you can see how quick and easy it is to make corrections within Dragan. I'm going to do some other quick formatting commands as well. Select the Miranda rights. Make it bold. Center that. Make it red. And again, Dragan allows you to make those changes quickly and easily. Insert before right. Choose 1. Absolute. Dragan lets you go in and make edits just using your voice with commands. You can move throughout the paragraph. You can insert any words. You can create spellings as well. Select all. Copy that. Here's an example. I just selected all of the text, and Dragan can then take that text and paste it, let's say, into our RMS system. So that gives a very quick overview of the Dragan product itself. I think at this point, what I'd like to do is see if we have any questions on the phone, and we can revisit any of what I've just discussed. But let me open it up at the moment for questions. So I have a question here. What about agencies that don't use NATO phonetics? Edward, thanks for asking the question. That's not a problem. It's just a capability that's built into Dragan. You don't need to use NATO phonetics at all. The question, do we have any specific headset that we recommend for using the software? I had mentioned using our PowerMic. It is a recommendation, not a requirement, but we find given the uses that police have mentioned and the ability, as I said, to use press to talk, push to talk, I should say, and just the overall reliability of the device, we do certainly recommend that you use that. It is not an absolute requirement. We have a question, how do you manage multiple officer profiles across the enterprise? That's a very good question. So I had mentioned our Nuance Management Center. And one of the things that you can do, we have a feature called dynamic profiling. In essence, what that allows you to do is an officer, when they use Dragan for the first time, the officer speaks into Dragan, not to train it. Some people may remember many years ago you needed to spend a lot of time training Dragan. The purpose of speaking into Dragan for about 2-3 minutes is to create a voice profile. So when an officer were to move, let's say, from patrol vehicle to patrol vehicle, they can just log out and log in to Dragan in that particular patrol car and the MDT, and Dragan follows them. When they log into whatever MDT and patrol vehicle they're at, Dragan follows them and has their voice profile ready so that they can move between vehicles without any degradation in voice recognition services. So question from Bob at Skip Typing, what law enforcement software programs are out there for RMS that Dragan works with? Bob, thanks for asking. As I mentioned, Dragan works with any Windows-based application where you can position a cursor and type with the keyboard. Dragan will take its place. However, we are working with the major players in the industry more from the standpoint of creating commands and making the RMS even easier to use if there are specific fields, if there's specific navigation within that RMS. We're working with the major players in the business to create even a higher level, if you will, of integration and customization. So the big names in the business, obviously Motorola, TriTech, we've been speaking with all of them and working closely with them to ensure that Dragan Law Enforcement integrates very well at a very high level within the product. Let's see for other questions here. Cost per unit, a couple of questions. What is the, Doug, thank you for asking, what is the approximate cost per unit, say for 20 units? Is there a trial offer? Do you have interfaces with Southern Software? I can't speak immediately about integration with Southern Software, but what I can tell you, Doug, is the pricing structure is a volume licensing-based structure. It obviously, as a volume licensing program, greater volumes translate into lower prices, but generally speaking, a perpetual license, and Dragan is a perpetual license, will run somewhere between $400 and $600 per license, depending on volume. You buy that once and you never need to buy it again. However, we do most often sell maintenance and support with Dragan, which is a percentage of the license cost, generally somewhere around 20%. What that entitles you to is unlimited tech support, as well as any upgrades to the product. As we introduce new features and new revisions, you're automatically entitled to that. And we would, love to connect you with our sales team. I think we had the names of Brooke and Sunny scrolling on the screen, so we'd love to connect you to get into more specifics. David asked a question: what happens to that officer's profile if they're transferred to a different unit? Can another officer assume that profile? David, the answer to that question is licenses are administered, so the officer can have their profile follow them and a new license created. But if that officer keeps their profile, they're still with the force, there would need to be a new profile created for them. But there's absolutely the ability to have that profile follow them throughout, as long as it's part of the same force and part of the same central administration. Greg asked a question: can Dragan be used on iPads to dictate reports and then email the report to the officer's report? Greg, the answer to your question is Dragan Law Enforcement itself is a Windows-based application only. However, Nuance has a product called Dragan Anywhere, which many customers use, that is for the iPad and Android devices, both tablet and on phones, that is used, and it also can be tied into our Nuance Management Center. It is not a specific law enforcement only product, but in terms of basic dictation, you can capture dictation and even commands if it's tied into our Nuance Management Center. Commands that may have been created in Dragan Law Enforcement, again, let's say a custom word, can follow you to using Dragan Anywhere. But again, Dragan Anywhere is a separate product. It is an app for both Android and iOS. I think we have one more question here. We have tried voice-based dictation systems before, but the ambient background noise in our workspace tends to make it ineffective. Does Dragan Law Enforcement have noise silencing technology, and has it improved? The answer to that question is indeed, it does. I had mentioned that at the user level, using a PowerMic and noise canceling microphone, Dragan does filter that out. Any ambient noise is filtered out. Also, at the software level itself, Dragan has the ability, as it's listening, to filter out background as well. So we've typically showed Dragan if we've been at a very busy trade show, and there's lots of ambient noise. People are very impressed and amazed at how easily Dragan filters out all of the ambient and background noise. And let's see if there's anything else. We have one more question. What is the typical time/learning curve it takes a user to become proficient with the system? As I had mentioned, unlike what some people recall from many years past, out of the box today, Dragan is extremely accurate. And the learning curve tends to be, very, very short. What it does do, Dragan, is allow, with your permission, and I want to emphasize that, Dragan can go out and scan your emails and your Word documents, etc., just to understand how it is that you structure sentences and you put them together. That's completely optional, but there is the ability to really fine-tune the ability to do that. The learning curve itself is very short. Okay, I think that's it for questions. Elena, if there are no further questions, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We would be happy, again, between Brooke and Sunny, to follow up with anybody on the phone. We'll be sending out a recorded link to this webinar and would encourage you, obviously, to forward that to all of your colleagues. And please let us know how we can help. We're available at our sales team to show live demonstrations, obviously over webinar or in person, as well as to create pilots for you before you implement Dragan at scale. So if there's no further questions, Elena, I want to thank everyone for joining today, and we look forward to an opportunity to speak with you all in the future. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.